Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be making lemon garlic tuna patties. These are super easy and real quick, so let's get to the ingredients and we'll get ready to cook. Alright, for our ingredients we have 2 cans tuna, drained, a half a cup of breadcrumbs, 2 to 4 tablespoons mayo, a half a teaspoon lemon juice, a quarter teaspoon salt, a half a teaspoon pepper, 1 teaspoon onion powder, 1 teaspoon garlic powder, and an eighth of a teaspoon chili powder. And a cat foot in the upper left that we don't need for the recipe. Alright, the first step for me is to make some breadcrumbs. You can use any store-bought ones, it's not really going to matter for a recipe like this. The reason I'm making these is because I have a dairy allergy. So, if you have something like that, or don't have access to breadcrumbs at the moment, but you do have some older bread, so all you really need to do is break it into small pieces like you see me doing here, and just spread them out in a nice, even layer, and put it in the oven for about an hour or so, about an hour to hour and a half, 250 degrees. Anything above 250 might start toasting the bread, and you don't want that. You just want it to dry it out. Because as soon as we're done with our bread, since we're going to be running it through a mini food processor. Alright, after they've been in there for about an hour, hour and a half, and you're confident that they're fully dried, we're going to just put them into a mini food processor. In this case, it's a hand blender with a food processor attachment. So all we got to do is just toss them in there and then just start pulsing it till we get them as fine as we would like. I should have gone a little finer. Yours will be better from my mistake. I actually left them a little bit larger, and I was hoping that you would get sort of a bready taste to make it almost a middle ground between a tuna cake and a tuna patty. Unfortunately, it didn't really work out with the larger breadcrumbs. It just didn't really hold together very well. Whereas with a much finer breadcrumb, it's much easier and it stays together a ton better. It's 100% worth it to just make sure, if you're going to make your own breadcrumbs, make sure you make them very fine for this. So, since that's been fast forwarding in the background, we shall get to let's start getting everything mixed together part. Alright, so with the rest of the ingredients on the way, once we get both of our cans of tuna into the mixing bowl that we're going to use, we want to start breaking that tuna up and making sure that there's not overly large pieces of it. And that'll make it so when you're eating the tuna cake, it's not going to, you won't have like one piece that's like, oh my god, tuna, and then the next piece is like, oh, that's just mostly breadcrumbs. Lovely two-cat sighting in the background. Wonder what they're investigating. It's tuna. So, once you get it all broken up, and it'll only just take you a couple minutes, you basically just keep crushing them with the fork, any of the larger pieces you see, and giving it a stir. And after a little bit, you're going to find that when you're stirring, you're not really seeing any large chunks. At that point, usually when I stop, because I don't necessarily need it to be 100% not, uniform in size, but I would like it all in the neighborhood. So that way you do occasionally get a slightly bigger chunk, but not like that whole bite was just made of tuna. And if you look at the texture you see here, it's basically just getting it down to that. And once you're there, you are golden, and we are ready for the next ingredients. Alright, starting with our lemon juice and then our mayonnaise. Now, I'm going to end up using a little bit more mayonnaise, and you might as well. It really does depend on your breadcrumbs. If you have some really fine breadcrumbs, it's going to take a little bit more mayonnaise than the initial 2 tablespoons I start with. Or if you have gigantic boulders of breadcrumbs like I'm using, it will also take more extra mayonnaise. What you want to do before you add the breadcrumbs, though, is just kind of make sure everything is mixed in together, and that's what I'm doing here, is just making sure that all of the spices they're not any pockets or anything like that. And once you get the breadcrumbs in, it's going to start sort of gumming up, and it would make it really hard to make sure everything is spread throughout the dish if we added it at the same time. What we will do, though, is add that and then get it mixing, and it looked just a bit too dry. I tried to form a couple patties, and it turned out to be just a little bit too dry. Again, that's my fault, because the breadcrumbs I'm using should have been probably about half the size that they are. And had I just kept them on the food processor for a few moments more, it would have worked a lot better than they did for me. So, you won't have that problem. I'm going to need to add myself some more mayonnaise. right after we form a few patties. And that's actually what you need to do, is just form a couple patties, and if they start falling apart, like you'll notice that as soon as I set this down, it starts falling apart. And that's, again, from the breadcrumbs being too big. They couldn't act as a binder for that. Once you've made a couple patties, usually 3 or 4, you can tell if it's going to hold together or not. Also, if you wanted to turn this recipe into a crab cake, you would just add 1 egg. That's literally all you would have to do. Alright, about that extra mayonnaise, in my case, because the breadcrumbs were so large, they soak up a lot more mayonnaise and don't distribute it around, so it's more pockets of mayonnaise. That's what goes wrong with the big breadcrumbs, and that's why they also don't form cohesive patties. So I had to add a little bit more mayonnaise, and it was still not great. Regular sized breadcrumbs like you're going to use, it's going to be perfectly fine. And you'll notice the patty's a little bit squishy, a little bit wet, and again, that's going to go on the frying pan, and we're going to fry that up to a nice golden brown, and it'll be fine for that. So let's go look at the frying pan. Alright, once your pan is preheated up to about medium-high, or in between medium and medium-high, we want to put a little bit of oil in it and then gently lay the patties in. And again, yours are going to be a little bit more cohesive than mine were, because the breadcrumb size is going to allow them to spread the mayonnaise out instead of making mayonnaise pockets like I got. You want to go probably 2.5 to 3 minutes on each side. I would recommend turning more than just waiting. In other words, if you wait 2 minutes and turn it over, then go ahead and wait another 2 and turn it over. This is not one of those things where you need to sort of keep it on the heat at the whole time. So what we will be looking for is, and let me jump ahead to that, is for all, or at least most of them, to attain a nice golden brown before we turn them the first time. And part of the turning thing, and the reason I say you can turn them more than you would anticipate, or a lot of people you'll see only turn things once. In this case, turning them extra times is not a bad thing, because you're trying to get a nice even heat throughout the whole patty anyway. So once they start to get golden brown like this, and yours should have a slightly more evenness on the golden brown, simply because, again, the breadcrumbs thing is, mine were too big, and so you'll see a lot of patchiness and cragginess going on here. But once you have them at this, just turn them over, leave them on there for about another 2 minutes, maybe 3, and then turn them over. And you can just keep doing that for another minute or 2 until they reach whatever stage it is of browning that you want for yours. And if you do add the egg and you're turning this into a tuna cake, you would want to probably go about 3.5 minutes per side. But you wouldn't want to go much over that, because the egg itself will get a little bit rubbery when it's acting as a binder and gets sort of heated too much. So again, this looks perfect. Not quite perfect, but close enough. And jumping ahead one last time, once I'd turned them over, it got about another 2 minutes or so, and they had browned up pretty nicely, and nice enough for what I wanted them to look like. So at this point, anytime you're after that second turn, you should be evenly heated enough inside for them to be perfectly ready. Alright, and with that, our lemon garlic tuna patties are done and ready to eat. Now I'm just going to serve mine with some hot sauce, as you see here. Nice vinegar-based hot sauce, I feel like gives it a really great flavor, and it complements off the lemon juice and the garlic, and just kind of rounds everything out, so you're getting all the flavors in one shot. This was actually really tasty. I enjoyed this one a lot. I'm going to be doing another video that's actually tuna cakes down the road, once I get a little more tuna. So, I hope you try this one, and if you haven't already, I would suggest you maybe subscribe if you enjoyed what you saw here, or maybe you tried the food and liked it. I'll be putting out 1 or 2 of these every week during the whole pandemic thing to try and just make easy recipes that anyone can make. So, with that, I thank you for watching and have a great meal.